The twilight bled over Ashford Valley like a dying animal refusing to close its eyes, painting the smoke-strangled sky in shades of char and crusted blood. The ruins of Ashford Village still smoldered 3 days after the iron wolves had swept through like death-given claws and torches. What had once been the most peaceful healer settlement in the Eastern Territories was now nothing but blackened timber bones and ash-choked ground that crumbled beneath small, stumbling feet like broken prayers. Through this devastation, a figure was being dragged. Kira Ashford was small, painfully, heartbreakingly small, compared to the slaver who yanked her chain like she was livestock headed to market. Her dress, once her mother's hand-stitched name-day gift, now hung from her thin frame in torn strips of scorched cotton, barely covering the bruises blooming purple and yellow across her ribs. Her dark hair, matted with 3 days of soot and her father's dried blood, fell in tangled ropes across a face too young to hold such emptiness. Her feet were bare, leaving bloody prints where hot coals had burned through skin that had never known anything harder than meadow grass. She looked broken, destroyed, exactly what they expected of a 7-year-old witch child worth 3 silver coins. 3 days earlier, Ashford Village had been alive with laughter. The harvest blessing drew healers from every corner of the territory. 83 souls gathered beneath the ancient oaks to celebrate the season and tend to the sick who'd traveled for miles seeking their gifts. Lanterns hung from branches like captured stars. Children chased each other through the blessing grounds while their parents prepared the sacred fires. Kira's mother, Elena, stood at the ceremony's heart, her amber eyes warm as she blessed a farmer's wife who'd been barren for 7 years. Her father, Thomas, tending the blessing fires with steady hands, feeding them herbs that made the smoke smell like hope. And in his cradle near the altar, baby Finn slept with the peaceful ignorance of the truly innocent. Kira remembered thinking she'd never been happier. Then the howls split the night, not one wolf, but hundreds. War horns shattered the sacred silence. The village gates exploded inward like they were made of paper. 200 iron wolves poured through the breach, their black armor drinking the firelight, their swords already wet with the blood of the gate guards. At their head rode Captain Darius Stone, his face carved from granite and regret. But it was the man beside him who spoke. High Chancellor Silas Crane unrolled a scroll, his voice carrying over the screams beginning to rise. By order of Alpha Lord Marcus Blackwell, the Ashford bloodline is condemned for practicing dark witchcraft and poisoning the Alpha Lord's brother. The sentence is death, all of them. Thomas stepped forward, hands raised in peace. "We healed Lord Caden. We saved his life. There must be some mistake." The arrow took him through the throat. Kira watched her father fall, watched the blood bubble from his lips as he tried to speak, tried to reach for her mother, tried to understand why saving a life had cost him his own. Then the killing began in earnest. Healers who'd never raised a weapon in violence were cut down where they stood. Old Marta, who'd delivered half the children in the village, beheaded mid-prayer. Young Samuel, barely 15, run through while trying to shield his pregnant sister. The blessing grounds became a slaughterhouse, the sacred fires fed with bodies instead of herbs. Elena grabbed Kira's arm with desperate strength. "Run, now!" They fled through chaos, past screaming, past dying, past horrors no 7-year-old should witness, until they reached the ancient healing well at the village's heart. Elena wrenched open the hidden entrance, revealing the sacred chamber below. "Hide here, my love." She was crying now, tears cutting tracks through the ash already settling on her face. "Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear. Promise me." "Mama, come with me." "I have to get your brother." Elena's amber eyes blazed with a mother's terrible love. "I'll come back, I promise." She gripped Kira's face between trembling hands. "Remember what we are, Kira. Healers, not destroyers. Promise me." "I promise, Mama." Elena lowered her into the darkness, sealed the entrance, and was gone. Through cracks in the ancient stone, Kira watched soldiers drag her mother toward the central square, heard Finn crying, that distinctive wail she'd know anywhere, heard her mother screaming his name. Then silence. Silence that lasted hours, silence broken only by crackling flames and distant laughter and the wet sounds of bodies being piled. When Kira finally crawled out, the village was ash and corpses. She found her mother near the altar, curled around the cradle as if she could protect Finn even in death. Both of them burned, both of them gone. Kira didn't scream, didn't cry, just knelt in the ash beside her mother's body and felt something inside her chest crack like ice over a frozen river. Well, well, missed one. She turned. Captain Darius Stone stood over her, sword drawn, face unreadable. Their eyes met, his gray and haunted, hers amber and empty. His sword rose and stopped. "Damn it," he whispered. "Damn it all." He couldn't do it, couldn't kill a child, even a witch child, even with orders burning in his ears. So he sold her instead. 3 silver coins, that's all the passing slavers paid for the last Ashford. 3 silver coins for a 7-year-old girl with amber eyes and ash in her hair, and a promise to her dead mother still warm on her lips. The chains closed around Kira's small wrists, the village burned behind her, and as the slavers dragged her toward a darkness that would last 15 years, something inside that broken child died forever. But something else, something cold, something patient, something the captain should have drowned in the river, began to grow, and it would remember everything. 1 month before 83 people burned, a young lord sat in his father's chair and tried to remember how to breathe. Alpha Lord Marcus Blackwell was 28 years old, 3 weeks into a lordship he'd never wanted, and watching his brother die. Caden lay in the silk sheets of his sickbed, skin the color of old parchment, breath rattling like stones in a dry riverbed. The court physicians had tried everything, herbs, poultices, prayers to gods who weren't listening. Nothing worked. The mysterious illness ate through Caden like fire through paper, and Marcus could only watch his last family member slip away. Desperation makes men do dangerous things. "Send for the Ashford healers," Marcus had commanded, ignoring the gasps from his advisors. "I don't care about the old superstitions. If they can save him, send for them." Elena Ashford arrived with amber eyes and gentle hands. She asked no payment, made no demands, simply worked through 3 days and nights until Caden's fever broke, until color returned to his cheeks, until he opened his eyes and asked for water. Marcus wept with relief. Elena wept with him. He should have trusted that moment, should have remembered the tears of a woman who'd saved a stranger's life for nothing but the joy of healing. But High Chancellor Silas Crane had other plans. "My lord, we need to speak privately." Silas closed the chamber doors with the soft click of a trap springing shut. "About the Ashfords." He spread documents across Marcus's desk, trade records, witness statements, a damning tapestry of lies woven with expert precision. "They didn't cure your brother, my lord. They poisoned him first." Marcus's blood turned to ice. "What?" "Think about it." Silas's voice dripped false concern. "Lord Caden was healthy until 3 months ago. The illness appeared from nowhere, resisted all treatment, except theirs. Convenient, wouldn't you say?" That's impossible. Elena Ashford wept when he recovered." "Crocodile tears." Silas produced more papers. I have witnesses, servants who saw the Ashfords whispering curses over his food, adding strange substances to their medicines. Their amber eyes aren't natural, my lord. They're marks of dark pacts made generations ago. The witnesses were lies, bought and paid for with Crane gold, but Marcus didn't know that, couldn't know that. He only saw the evidence mounting like a flood against a failing dam. Your grandfather drove them from court 40 years ago, Silas continued, his voice silk over steel. They knew what they were, blood witches, manipulators. They've been waiting for a weak moment to strike, and your father's death gave them exactly that. Weak. The word cut deeper than any blade. Marcus thought of the nobles whispering behind his back, the generals questioning his orders, the weight of a crown that felt more like a noose with every passing day. And their lands, Silas added, almost casually. The Sacred Grove territories. Our surveyors found mineral deposits worth more than the entire Eastern Treasury. If the Ashfords were removed. It wasn't the greed that broke Marcus, it was the fear. Fear of appearing weak before nobles who already doubted him. Fear of the amber-eyed witches his grandmother had whispered warnings about in childhood. Fear of losing his brother to people who might poison him again if they weren't stopped. Fear of being the lord who let evil fester because he was too cowardly to act. How many are there? His voice didn't sound like his own. Silas smiled, and Marcus was too afraid to see the triumph in it. 83, my lord, including children. But the bloodline carries the curse, if even one survives. Marcus closed his eyes, saw Caden's pale face, saw his father's disappointed ghost, saw a kingdom that would devour him if he showed a moment's hesitation. No survivors, no witnesses. Make it quick. He signed the execution order with a hand that barely trembled. Silas Crane bowed low to hide his smile, already calculating the value of Ashford lands, already planning how the young lord's guilt would make him easier to control, already knowing that 83 innocent people would die for his ambition. And in Ashford Village, 7-year-old Kira Ashford was helping her mother prepare lanterns for the harvest blessing, unaware that a frightened young lord had just signed her death warrant, unaware that in 30 days everyone she loved would burn, unaware that 20 years later she would stand over that same lord's kneeling body and decide whether mercy or murder would define her legacy. 5 years of chains will break anything soft in a person. Kira learned this in the Thorn Market slave quarters, where children were currency and mercy was a myth rich people told themselves existed. She learned it in the mines, where they worked her until her small fingers bled and her back bent under loads meant for grown men. She learned it in the cold nights, huddled with other forgotten souls, fighting for scraps of bread and patches of warmth. The healer's daughter, who'd once picked wildflowers with her mother, became something else entirely, something harder, something that knew how to take a beating without crying, how to steal food without getting caught, how to make herself invisible when the overseers came looking for entertainment. But the mines were just the beginning. At 12 years old, Kira was sold to the fighting pits of Korath, a lawless territory where laws went to die and slaves fought for the pleasure of crowds who'd forgotten what humanity looked like. The pitmaster was a mountain of scarred flesh named Varro. He grabbed her face the moment she arrived, twisting it toward the torchlight to examine his new property. Then he saw her eyes. Well, well, his laugh was gravel scraping stone. Witch eyes. Haven't seen those in years. He threw her toward the training cages. The crowd will love watching you die, little witch. Put her in tomorrow's opener. Her first fight was against a boy named Crag, 15 years old, twice her size, with fists like hammers and dead eyes that said he'd killed before and would kill again. Kira was supposed to lose. The opener was always a slaughter, a sacrifice to warm the crowd's bloodlust before the real fights began. Crag's hands closed around her throat, her vision darkened, her lungs screamed for air that wouldn't come. "Remember what we are, Kira, healers, not destroyers." Her mother's voice, impossibly clear, and with it something else, something ancient stirring in her blood, something the Ashfords had carried for generations. Heat flooded her veins like liquid fire, her amber eyes blazed gold, and suddenly she could see, not just Crag's hands but the weakness in his grip, the old injury in his left shoulder, the way he'd overextended, leaving his throat exposed. Her hands moved without thought, found the pressure point below his ear, pressed. Crag dropped like a stone. The crowd went silent, then erupted. "Witch! Witch! Witch!" Kira stood over her fallen opponent, chest heaving, hands trembling, not understanding what she'd done or how she'd done it, only knowing she was alive when she should have been dead. She should have died the next fight too, and the one after that, and the 30 after that. She didn't. The crowd started calling her the Amber Ghost, the child who wouldn't die, the witch spawn who saw strikes before they came, the impossible survivor who turned certain death into impossible victory night after night. By 13, she'd killed 50 men. By 15, she was the pit's undefeated champion. By 17, she'd brought her freedom with blood money, 300 kills, each one another piece of her mother's promise crumbling to ash. The day she walked out of Korath's gates, Varro counted his coins and laughed. "Enjoy your freedom, little ghost, but we both know what you are now. You'll never wash that blood off your hands." Kira didn't look back, just walked into the dusty road, a free woman for the first time in 10 years. Freedom tasted like copper and ash. She was alive, but the healer's daughter was dead, murdered somewhere between the first kill and the 300th, buried in a pit where no one remembered her name. What had crawled out in her place? She didn't know yet, but somewhere in the back of her mind, amber eyes that weren't hers watched from the flames of memory. 83 ghosts, waiting, and one name burned brighter than all the others: Blackwell. Freedom was supposed to taste like victory. Instead, it tasted like ash and cheap ale in a borderland tavern so far from civilization that even the rats looked desperate. Kira sat alone in the darkest corner, back to the wall, eyes on every exit. 17 years old, 10 years removed from the burning, 300 kills carved into her soul like notches on a blade. Her body was a map of violence, scars crossing scars, knuckles permanently swollen, a twist in her left shoulder where it had been dislocated and reset wrong. The soft healer's daughter was a ghost. What remained was something harder, something that made grown men cross to the other side of the street. She'd learned to hide her amber eyes behind dark lenses, learned to never stay in one place too long, learned that survival meant trusting no one. So when the old woman sat across from her uninvited, Kira's knife was at her throat before the stranger could draw breath. "One reason," Kira growled. "Give me one reason not to open your windpipe." The woman didn't flinch, just smiled, sad and ancient and knowing. "I knew your mother, child." The knife pressed harder, drew blood. "My mother is dead. Everyone who knew her is dead." "Not everyone." The woman slowly pushed back her hood, white hair, weathered face, and eyes that made Kira's heart stop. Amber, flecked with gold, exactly like hers. "My name is Marin," the woman said softly. "I escaped the burning through the eastern caves, the ones your grandmother showed me when I was young. I've been searching for survivors for 10 years. The knife trembled, didn't lower. "There are no survivors." "There's you." Marin's amber eyes held no fear, only grief. "Little Kira Ashford, Elena's daughter. I held you the day you were born. Your mother wept with joy because your eyes were the brightest gold she'd ever seen." Something cracked in Kira's chest, something she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten it existed. The Ashfords weren't witches, child. Marin reached across the table, gently pushed the knife aside. "We were healers, blessed by the old gods. Our bloodline carried gifts, the ability to sense illness, mend wounds with touch, see truth in hearts that tried to hide it. Then why? The witch hunts were never about protecting the kingdom, they were about land. Marin's voice hardened. Silas Crane's father started it, manufactured evidence against healer families, accused them of dark magic, seized their territories when they burned. Silas perfected the strategy. Your family's sacred grove was simply the largest prize. Kira's hands shook. 300 kills, 300 lives taken because she'd been too angry, too broken, too lost to know the truth. Your mother didn't just hide you to save your life. Marin gripped her scarred hands. She hid you because you carry the strongest healer blood in 3 generations. If you died, the Ashford line would truly be extinct. Our gifts would be gone forever. Kira stared at her hands. Killer's hands. Pit fighter's hands. Hands that had choked the life from men twice her size. "I'm no healer," her voice cracked. "Look at what I am. Look at what I've done." "I see what they made you." Marin's amber eyes blazed with fierce love. "But that's not what you have to stay, child. The gift is still in your blood. Buried maybe, wounded certainly, but not dead." She stood, extended her hand. "Come with me. Let me teach you what your mother never got the chance to. The truth, the gifts, the purpose they tried to burn out of existence." Kira looked at that weathered hand, at the amber eyes that promised something she'd forgotten how to feel. Hope. She took it. And somewhere in the darkness of her soul, a healer's heart began to beat again. But healing herself would be nothing compared to what came next, because Marin had something else. Evidence, documents, names, everything they needed to burn Silas Crane's lies to the ground. And Kira was about to learn that the path to justice required more than just surviving. It required becoming something the Blackwells had never imagined: a weapon, a witness, and eventually an executioner. 15 years of nightmares will hollow out even the strongest man. Alpha Lord Marcus Blackwell sat alone in his chambers at midnight, a bottle of Thornwick whiskey his only companion. The fire had burned low, casting shadows that looked too much like reaching hands, too much like small bodies curling in flames. He drank until the screams stopped echoing. Some nights it took half a bottle. Tonight it was taking more. 43 years old, Lord of the Eastern Territories, master of 10,000 soldiers, and every single night he saw their faces. 83 of them, men, women, children, healers who'd never raised a hand in violence, burning because he'd been too weak and too afraid to question a snake's lies. The worst part? He hadn't even known they were innocent until it was far too late. His wife had told him. Lady Sarah, beautiful, gentle Sarah, dying in childbirth 8 years ago, blood soaking the sheets, life draining from her eyes as she gripped his hand with desperate strength. "I'm sorry," she'd whispered. "I'm sorry I hid it from you. My grandmother was Ashford. I thought the blood had faded, that it wouldn't matter, but our son—" Marcus had looked at the screaming infant in the midwife's arms, at the eyes that should have been brown like his, or green like Sarah's. Amber, with flecks of gold that caught the candlelight like captured flames. The same eyes he'd ordered burned from existence 15 years before. "Protect him," Sarah breathed. "Promise me, promise me." She died with that plea on her lips. And Marcus had kept his promise, with expensive glamours that hid Theo's eyes from the world, with lies about a childhood illness that kept the boy isolated from court, with the kind of paranoid secrecy that ate at his soul like acid. Only 3 people knew the truth: the midwife, paid enough to buy silence, the court mage who maintained the glamours, and Marcus himself, who couldn't look at his own son without seeing the ghosts of children he'd ordered slaughtered. Healers, not witches. He'd learned that 5 years ago when he found his grandmother's hidden journal in the sealed archives. Page after page of truth that damned Silas Crane's family for engineering witch hunts across 3 generations, land grabs disguised as holy purges, innocent bloodlines exterminated for profit. And Marcus had been their perfect puppet. He confronted no one, changed nothing publicly. The revelation would destroy his rule, expose his crimes, put Theo at risk. So he'd done the coward's work instead, secretly funneling gold to organizations helping witch-marked refugees, trying to save strangers because he couldn't save the dead. Pathetic. Pathetic. Nothing would bring back the 83 people he'd burned. Nothing would wash their blood from his hands. Nothing would make him worthy of the son who ran to him with amber eyes full of love, not understanding why his father sometimes couldn't bear to look at him. The whiskey burned going down. Not enough. Never enough. Somewhere in the castle, Theo slept peacefully, glamours hiding the truth of what he was. And somewhere out there, if the rumors were true, a woman called the Amber Ghost was building an army. A survivor with golden-flecked eyes and 300 kills to her name. A ghost from the village Marcus had burned, coming back to collect on a debt 15 years overdue. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered to the darkness, to the flames, to the 83 faces that would never stop haunting him. "I'm so sorry." The ghosts didn't answer. They never did. But perhaps soon their executioner would answer for them. And Marcus knew, with the bone-deep certainty of the damned, that when she came for him, and she would come for him, he wouldn't be able to tell her about his son, wouldn't be able to beg for mercy for the child who carried the same blood he'd tried to erase from existence. Some sins were beyond forgiveness, and some debts could only be paid in blood. 15 years of drinking hadn't drowned a single scream. Captain Darius Stone, former captain, retired in disgrace that only he recognized, sat in a border town tavern so far from Blackwell territory that maps forgot it existed. The ale was cheap, the company was worse, and every night, when he closed his eyes, he saw a 7-year-old girl with amber eyes watching her village burn. 3 silver coins. That's what he'd sold her for. 3 silver coins pressed into a slaver's greedy palm, because he couldn't bring himself to put a sword through a child's chest. He'd told himself it was mercy. She would have died otherwise. Silas Crane had eyes everywhere, would have found her, would have finished what the massacre started. At least in slavery she had a chance. 15 years of nightmares called him a liar. Every night the same dream, small wrists disappearing into iron chains, amber eyes that held no tears, only a terrible, ancient emptiness, and his own voice, cracking, "Move her out before anyone sees." Some mercies were worse than murder. The rumors found him 6 months ago, a mercenary commander making waves across 5 kingdoms. They called her the Amber Ghost, a woman with golden-flecked eyes who'd climbed from the fighting pits of Korath to lead the deadliest company of sellswords east of the Thornwall. Methodical, patient, gathering. Stone knew, in his bones, in his blood, in the guilt that had rotted him from the inside out, he knew. The child he'd sold had survived, and she was coming home. It wasn't the only sign. The iron wolves who'd ridden into Ashford Village that night were dying. Not murdered, nothing so clean as that. Captain Venn fell from his horse and broke his neck on flat ground. Lieutenant Marsh's heart stopped mid-meal for no reason. Sergeant Cole caught a fever that turned his blood to poison in 3 days. Accidents, illnesses, impossible coincidences that claimed 19 wolves in 8 months. The survivors whispered about a curse, about amber eyes watching from shadows, about the land itself rising up to collect debts written in innocent blood. Stone didn't believe in curses, but he believed in her. He started leaving things where they might be found, messages in coded drops used by mercenary networks, patrol routes around the Blackwell estate, guard rotations for the winter solstice gathering, when every noble in the territory would pack into one glittering hall. Confession or invitation? He wasn't sure anymore. Maybe both. His hands shook as he wrote the final message, the one that would seal his fate either way. A map of the castle's servant passages, the schedule of guard changes, the exact route to reach the Great Hall undetected. And at the bottom, 3 words that cost him more than anything he'd ever written. "I'm sorry, child." He left it in the dead drop at midnight, then walked back to his rented room above the tavern, drew his sword, laid it across his knees. If she came for him first, and she had every right to, he wouldn't fight. He'd kneel, offer his throat, accept whatever judgment those amber eyes decided he deserved. 3 silver coins, the price of an Ashford life, the price of his soul. Stone closed his eyes and waited for ghosts, or for something far worse, because somewhere out there the amber ghost had received his message, and she was already moving. The winter solstice was 30 days away, and 83 souls were about to have their voices heard at last. The Blackwell Great Hall had never looked more beautiful, or more like a trap. Ice sculptures glittered beneath 1,000 candles, silver banners cascaded from vaulted ceilings, 300 nobles packed the space in their finest silks and sharpest ambitions, drinking wine that cost more than most families earned in a year. The winter solstice gathering, the social event of the decade. Every powerful family in the Eastern Territories crammed into one glittering cage. Perfect. Kira entered with the Korath delegation, her mercenary reputation opening doors her Ashford blood would have slammed shut. Dark lenses hid her amber eyes, foreign armor disguised her purpose. To anyone watching, she was just another sellsword hired to look intimidating. 15 years she'd waited for this moment. 15 years of slavery, of blood, of becoming something her mother would never have recognized. And now she was here, walking through the castle of the man who'd signed her family's death warrant, surrounded by nobles who'd laughed as healers burned. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, gathering intelligence with every step. Guard positions, exit routes, the faces of men she'd memorized from Marin's evidence, iron wolves who'd participated in the massacre, living their comfortable lives as if 83 souls didn't cry out for justice. Then she saw him. Alpha Lord Marcus Blackwell sat on the raised dais, looking every inch the powerful ruler, and nothing like the monster she'd imagined for 15 years. His face was lined with exhaustion, his eyes were hollow. He held his wine cup like a man drowning, not celebrating. And beside him, Kira's breath caught. A small boy, 8 years old, maybe 9, dark hair, expensive clothes, and eyes hidden behind glamours that flickered, just for a moment, in the candlelight. Amber, flecked with gold. Impossible. The lord who'd burned her people had a son with healer blood, a child marked with the same curse he'd tried to exterminate. The irony was so sharp it nearly cut her in half. Beautiful, isn't it? Captain Darius Stone appeared beside her, older, grayer, swimming in guilt she could smell like cheap perfume. He didn't look at her directly, just stared at the glittering hall with the eyes of a man watching his own funeral. "I sold you for 3 silver coins," he said quietly. "I've waited 15 years to pay that debt." Her hand found her blade. "You expect me to thank you for leading me here?" "I expect nothing," his voice cracked. "I just wanted you to know, the servants' passage behind the 3rd tapestry leads directly to the dais. Guard rotation changes in 12 minutes. If you're going to do this, do it now." Why help me? Stone finally looked at her. Amber eyes met gray ones, and she saw something she hadn't expected. Relief. Because some debts can only be paid one way. Before she could respond, the glamour on her eyes flickered, failed. A noble beside her gasped, wine splattering across silk as he stumbled backward. Ashford! His scream cut through music and laughter like a blade. The witch lives! So much for subtlety. 300 heads turned, 300 mouths opened in horror, and on the dais, Alpha Lord Marcus Blackwell's face went white as bone. Guards surged forward, swords cleared scabbards. The glittering celebration transformed into chaos in the space of a single heartbeat. Kira smiled. Let them come. She'd waited 15 years for this moment, and every single person in this hall was about to learn what happened when you burned healers and sold children and thought the dead would stay buried. The great hall erupted into chaos the moment Kira's glamour shattered. Ashford, the witch lives! 300 nobles screamed as one. Guards surged forward, swords drawn, boots thundering against ancient stone. The glittering celebration transformed into a battlefield in the space of a single heartbeat. Kira moved. 15 years of the pits had made her body a weapon, but something held her back. Every instinct screamed kill, demanded blood, craved the familiar copper taste of vengeance finally realized. She didn't listen. Disabling strikes, non-lethal takedowns, a guard's knee shattered by her heel, another's arm twisted until tendons snapped, a third dropped by pressure points her mother's ghost seemed to guide her toward. Healers, not destroyers. Even now, even here. The Ashford witch has returned to murder us all, Silas Crane's voice cut through the pandemonium like a serpent's hiss. He stood on the dais, face twisted with something between fury and fear. Guards, protect your lord, kill her now! But Kira wasn't attacking. She stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, surrounded by groaning guards, and reached into her armor, drew out documents wrapped in oiled leather, held them high where every terrified noble could see. The Ashfords never poisoned anyone. Her voice carried like thunder. High Chancellor Silas Crane manufactured evidence to seize our lands. Trade records, payment receipts, witness testimonies bought and paid for with Crane gold. She threw the documents toward the nearest lord. He's done it to 6 healer families over 20 years. My people were just the largest prize. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then Silas laughed, high and brittle and desperate. Dark magic! She's ensorceling you all! Can't you see? Kill her before she... Something awakened. Not from training, not from the pits, from something far older, from truth finally being spoken in the very place where lies had been built. Kira's amber eyes blazed gold. Heat radiated from her skin in visible waves, and the ancient stones in the hall, stones older than the Blackwell lordship, older than the kingdom itself, began to glow. Every wolf in the great hall felt it, a presence, a weight, something pressing against their very souls, demanding truth, burning through every lie they'd ever told themselves. Guards dropped their weapons, clutching their heads and screaming. Nobles collapsed to their knees, faces contorted with the agony of deceptions being stripped away. Ladies wept, lords clawed at their chests. The weight of truth was unbearable to those who'd built their lives on comfortable darkness. Only 2 remained standing. Kira, blazing with power she was just beginning to understand, power her mother had carried, her grandmother had carried, her bloodline had protected for generations, and Marcus Blackwell. Tears streamed down the Alpha Lord's face, not from the magic's pressure, from recognition, from guilt 15 years in the making finally given a face, a name, a reckoning. Kill her! Silas shrieked, but no one could move. No one could do anything but kneel before truth made manifest. Marcus descended from the dais, slowly, deliberately, each step a confession. He stopped before Kira, looked into eyes the same color as his son's, the eyes he'd tried to exterminate, the eyes that now judged him with 15 years of suffering burning in their depths. He removed his lord's chain of office, placed it on the ground, and knelt. "I'm ready to pay for what I did." The great hall held its breath. 300 witnesses, 1 executioner, and a choice that would determine whether the Ashford bloodline ended in justice or in blood. But Kira wasn't looking at Marcus anymore. She was looking at the small boy being dragged forward by Silas's personal guards, a terrified child with dark hair and glamored eyes that flickered just for a moment, revealing amber flecked with gold. Marcus's son, her blood, and Silas Crane's final desperate card.
Marcus's confession spilled out like blood from an open wound. "I believed the lies. I was afraid. I was weak." His voice cracked on each word. 83 people died because I was too cowardly to question a snake whispering in my ear. Children, babies. I signed their death warrants because I was terrified of looking weak. Tears carved rivers down his face. The great hall remained frozen, 300 nobles witnessing their lord's complete destruction. "Every night for 15 years I've heard them screaming. Every night I've seen their faces burning, and I deserve every single nightmare." Kira stared down at him, amber eyes blazing gold, power crackling around her like a living storm. This was the moment she'd dreamed of for 15 years, the man who'd destroyed everything, kneeling at her feet, broken and begging. So why did it feel hollow? "How touching!" Silas Crane's voice slithered through the silence. He stepped forward, dark charm glinting at his throat, protected from the healer magic that had dropped everyone else to their knees. His personal guards, the only soldiers still standing, dragged a small figure between them. "Let's see how the witch handles this." They threw Theo forward. The boy stumbled, caught himself, looked up with eyes his glamour could no longer hide. Amber, flecked with gold, terrified. "Your own son, Marcus." Silas's smile was poison. "Witch blood. By your own laws, the laws you signed, he should burn like the rest of them." "No!" Marcus lunged toward his child, but guards blocked him. "He's innocent. He's just a witch, an abomination. Unless—" Silas turned to Kira. "Kill her, Marcus. Prove your loyalty to the kingdom you claim to lead. Kill the Ashford witch, and perhaps I'll let your mongrel son live." The hall held its breath. Kira looked at the boy, 8 years old, trembling, amber eyes exactly like hers had been 15 years ago, when she'd hidden in a well and listened to her family die. She saw herself, the child in the darkness, the child in chains, the child who should have been a healer and became a killer instead. What would her mother have done? Kira crossed to Theo. Guards raised weapons. Marcus screamed her name. Silas laughed in triumph. She knelt, took his small hands. "It's all right," she said softly. "I know you're scared. I was scared too once." The healer gift flowed through her, not as a weapon, not as the force that had dropped 300 wolves to their knees, but as it was meant to be used. Gentle, warming, healing. Theo's terror eased, his trembling stopped. His amber eyes widened with wonder instead of fear. You're like me," he whispered. "Yes," Kira's voice was thick. "I'm exactly like you." She stood, turned to Silas, and the power that had been crackling around her focused into something far more dangerous than violence. Truth. "You think I came here to kill? You think 15 years of suffering made me into you?" Her voice resonated through the healer stones, amplified into something that shook the very foundations of the hall. "My mother's last words were to remember what we are, healers, not destroyers." She produced Marin's evidence, decades of Crane family crimes, payments to false witnesses, manufactured evidence against 6 healer bloodlines,
land deeds transferred through genocide. This man has murdered hundreds to steal land. He orchestrated my family's burning, and he was planning to use my return to frame Lord Blackwell and seize power for himself. The truth rang through the hall like a bell. The healer stones blazed white, and unlike lies, truth could not be denied. Silas lunged with a hidden blade, desperate, feral, all pretense of control abandoned. Kira could have killed him, easily. 15 years of violence had made her very, very good at killing. She disarmed him instead, twisted, pinned him to the ground, held his own blade to his throat. "This is for my mother." The edge drew blood. "For my father, for my baby brother Finn, for 83 people who never hurt anyone." The moment stretched into eternity. 300 witnesses, absolute power in her hands. One slash and it would be over. Vengeance, justice, what she deserved, what they all deserved. "But if I kill you like this," her voice dropped to a whisper only Silas could hear, "I become what you said I was, and I won't let you win, not even in death." She released him, stepped back, let the blade clatter to the ground. Silas stared up at her, disbelief and fury twisting his face into something inhuman. "Lord Blackwell," Kira's voice carried to every corner of the hall, "your kingdom, your justice, not mine." Marcus rose slowly. For the first time in 15 years, something other than guilt burned in his eyes. He looked at his son, at the woman who'd spared them both, at the serpent who'd destroyed so many lives. "Guards," his voice was iron, "take High Chancellor Silas Crane to the dungeons. He faces trial for treason, mass murder, and crimes against the realm." Silas screamed as they dragged him away, threats, curses, promises of revenge swallowed by slamming doors. And in the silence that followed, Theo's small hand found Kira's. "What happens now?" he asked. Kira looked at the kneeling nobles, the weeping lord, the blazing healer stones, and somewhere beneath 15 years of blood and rage, she felt something she'd thought the pits had killed forever. Hope. "Now," she said softly, "we heal." But healing, she would learn, was far harder than destruction, and some wounds, both hers and the kingdom's, ran deeper than any magic could reach.
1 week after the winter solstice, Silas Crane met justice. The trial was public. Every noble who'd witnessed his unmasking forced to watch as evidence mounted, as witnesses testified, as the full scope of 3 generations of Crane family genocide was laid bare for the kingdom to see. The verdict was unanimous. The sentence was death. Kira didn't watch the execution. She'd seen enough death to last 1,000 lifetimes. Instead, she stood in the ruins of Ashford Village, finally home after 15 years of exile. The blackened timber bones had been cleared away, fresh earth had been turned, and in the center of what had once been the blessing grounds, a memorial stone bore 83 names: Elena Ashford, Thomas Ashford, Finn Ashford, and 80 more. Every soul who'd burned so that one man could steal land he didn't deserve. Kira knelt before the stone, placed her hand against cold granite, and finally let herself weep. "I kept my promise, Mama," she whispered through tears. "I remembered what we are." Footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "The council has approved the restoration of Ashford lands." Marcus's voice was rough, uncertain. "And the formal recognition of healers as protected citizens. Any persecution based on amber eyes is now punishable by death." "Good." Silence stretched between them. 15 years of blood and guilt and impossible choices. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Marcus said finally. "I'll spend the rest of my life knowing that. But my son," his voice cracked, "thank you for showing him what his eyes mean, for not making him ashamed of what he is."
Kira turned, looked at the broken lord who'd once been her greatest enemy. Forgiveness isn't something you deserve, it's something you earn, day by day, choice by choice, starting now. Marcus nodded slowly. Then I'll start earning it. He left her alone with her dead. 6 months later, the first healer sanctuary rose on Ashford land. Young Theo was its first student, learning the gifts his father's family had tried to exterminate, discovering powers that had been hidden behind glamours and shame for 8 years. Kira taught him herself, just as Marin had taught her. Healers, not destroyers. Captain Stone came too, not as a prisoner, but as a builder. He spent his days hauling stone and mixing mortar, constructing with scarred hands what he'd helped destroy with violence. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't absolution, but it was something. Marin died peacefully in her sleep 3 months after the sanctuary opened. She went with a smile on her face, knowing the Ashford bloodline would survive. And Kira stood in the completed sanctuary 1 year after the winter solstice, watching amber-eyed children practice their gifts in the courtyard below. Her hand rested on her belly, where new life grew, the next generation of Ashford healers, conceived in hope instead of horror. Marcus visited with Theo, as he did every month. The alliance between them was strange, built on blood and guilt and impossible choices. But it was real. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve this mercy," Marcus said, watching his son heal a wounded bird with gentle, glowing hands. Mercy isn't about deserving, it's about breaking the cycle. She looked out at the sanctuary, at the healers training where her family had burned, at the future rising from ashes 15 years cold. They burned her village to ashes and sold her in chains, thinking they'd erased the Ashford line forever. But you can't burn away what someone truly is. You can only delay their return. So, what do you think? If you were Kira, standing in that great hall with the power to slaughter everyone who'd hurt you, would you have chosen justice or massacre? It's easy to say mercy when it's just a story, but what about when the scars are real, when the chains were around your wrists, when you spent 15 years becoming exactly the weapon they feared? If you had the power to completely destroy your enemies, would mercy still be the stronger choice? Or is justice only possible when you're strong enough that revenge doesn't define you? And here's what I keep wondering. What happens to the parts of us that violence creates? Can we ever truly heal what cruelty breaks? Or do we just learn to carry it differently? If this story moved you, if Kira's choice to break the cycle instead of perpetuating it hit you somewhere deep, share this with someone who needs to hear that transformation is possible. Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who chooses not to use all their power. And sometimes the strongest choice isn't destroying your enemies, it's proving them wrong about what you are.